Okay, so I'm going to show you how I made this feathered heart design for Valentine's Day. And it's also doing a trapunto effect. I'll show you some examples. These are some examples of trapunto on Pinterest. You can see there's kind of a poofy effect. Also often be a lot of feathering. This is called feathering, where there's these kind of loops, and it's usually a little thicker than regular quilting, and it's made to look more pillowy, and it's often white on white, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And sometimes these quilting patterns are just used for regular quilting as well. These sort of feathered designs. So here's an example of a more sophisticated heart, but we're just going to do a simple kind of feathering shape like this. And you can always find one of these designs and just bring it into Inkscape and trace it with your center line. And then you can stitch it out just as it is. But we're gonna kind of look at how to create these shapes on our own using Inkstitch and Inkscape. I'm gonna go ahead and open a new document here, and it's gonna default to my 4x4. So what I actually want to do is go File, New from Template, and under Custom I have my 300 by 200 hoop because I want to make a large pillow. But you of course can make a coaster using your 4x4 and just use a little less of the fill of the quilt batting, and you should be fine. You should still get a really cool effect. So to begin with, I'm gonna create my standard heart. So I have my grid up here, and I'm gonna turn my snapping on. I'm gonna select my ellipse tool, and I'm gonna let my mouse snap to one of these corners, and I'm gonna drag out a red circle that is 20 by 20 millimeters. And I left click on red and shift left click on none to get this circle that is filled with red but has no stroke. And so when I click on my selector tool, you can see it's 20 by 20 millimeters. So I'm gonna then duplicate that by pressing Ctrl D, and I'm gonna drag one over. Then I'm gonna grab my rectangle tool, and I'm gonna let it snap, and I'm gonna draw a 20 by 20 millimeter square. And I'm just gonna fill that with blue so you can see what's going on. Then I'm gonna drag my circle right next to it and on top. And so it's halfway filled in, but it will snap to these other grid lines. So that's basically my heart shape. Now I'm going to select them all, and I'm going to go to Path and Union. Then if I click on it once and then click on it twice, these rotation handles come up, and I can hold down Control and Shift and it'll snap, and I can put it upright. And then I have a heart. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple of duplicates of my heart. I'm going to put this one off screen. And then these two, you can always press 5 to come back to your canvas. Select these two now, and I'm going to shift left on my green and left click on this X so that I have no fill and just a green outline. I'm then gonna right click on the stroke width and set it to 1. So I just have these two outlines. And I'm going to take one of these and I want to leave about 20 millimeters. So 2 of these centimeter blocks on the left and top. And then I'm going to drag down from the bottom, and you can hold your control key to do it to scale. And I just want to make sure that I leave 2 on the bottom as well. And this line got thicker again because I have this button selected that says when scaling objects, scale the stroke width by the same proportion. So I'm going to have to come back in here now and change this back to 1. If I had deselected that before I made it larger, it would have stayed at 1 millimeter. So now I'm going to set this larger heart aside, and I'm going to work on this smaller heart. And this is what I'm going to use to make my feathers. And I'm going to select my node tool, and I'm going to select this inner node here, and I'm going to select this button up here that says break path at selected nodes. And with both of those selected, I'm going to go ahead and, or you can do one at a time, let that snap down here so that it's right underneath this other point. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn my snapping off because I don't really need it anymore. Not at the moment. I may need it again. Then I'm going to select these 2 middle points here, and I'm going to go ahead and just delete those. I'm now going to select these 2 top nodes and then select this make selected nodes symmetrical. Then you can kind of make them wider. I'm also going to just go ahead and deselect them and select one and drag it outward so that you have a wider V shape. Like that. Then with these bottom nodes, I'm going to kind of angle them inwards. And if you can't find them, you can just also drag the line. So drag this line in as well as this line. Drag it out so that you get much more of like a swoopy shape. You can kind of pull this one down. You can just kind of play with that shape and see how you want that line to bend. I like it to bend kind of like that. So you can just play with that shape until you have it the way that you like it. And it doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical on both sides, but it can be close. One can even be like a little larger if you like. Because most of the time this is done on a quilting machine where it's sort of drawn by hand. So, and you can also do that if you just rather draw it out by hand. So now I'm going to take this shape and I'm going to apply a path effect to it so that I can make multiples that get smaller. And I'm going to do that by going to path effects here, which you can get from this drop down dialog box. It's right here, path effects. Selected. I'm going to select this second drop down menu and select tiling. And you can see it repeats this shape. So I just want one column, and I want maybe 10 of these. I think that's what I did before. And then I would like that shape to get smaller. and I can do that by doing scale percent and selecting this button here. And you want it to go in the negative because you want it to get smaller. And then I want to kind of bring these all in close together. So I'm gonna adjust my gap Y to the negative until it looks like it's pretty close to everything looking like a bit like a feathered look. And you can add more and see how you feel about that. You can go to your original design and kind of adjust it a little bit to see if you can maybe make it to where it would fit in a little better. Or if you just want one side to kind of be outward. So at this point you can just play with the points and see how you feel about the distance between each feathering shape. I'm gonna actually back up a couple here. I think I like it about right there. And I'm going to leave it pretty much right there. I'm gonna make this gap a little bigger. Okay. So I think that looks pretty good. You can just kind of keep playing with it until you're happy with it. With that, I'm going to come over to my selector tool, and then I'm going to come to my big heart, and I'm going to go to my node selection tool, and I'm going to select these two middle points, and I'm going to break the path at those two middle points. I'm also going to, with my selector tool, select it and Command-Shift-K, which breaks it apart. And it's come to my attention that Command-Shift-K doesn't break apart for a lot of people. If you are on a Windows machine, you will have to set your preferences so that Command-Shift-K and Command-K work as a shortcut for combine and break apart. Because otherwise, on a Windows machine, Command-Shift-K is for preferences and it's under the edit menu, whereas on a Mac it's under Inkscape settings and there is no shortcut for it. Okay, so now we have these as two separate pieces, and we're going to put this path along this path. And so we need to apply a path effect to this object. So we're gonna come back down here to our drop down menu under path effects, and we're gonna select pattern along path. And we're gonna select this shape and we're gonna Command C to copy it. Then we're gonna come here and we're gonna make sure you have pattern copy set to single stretched, and make sure that you have pattern is vertical selected. And then you can paste. You can see it put your feathering on this line. And the cool thing is, since we have path effects applied to both of these objects, you can now come to this object. And one of the first things that I like to do is just make it kind of overall smaller so that it looks more natural on there. Okay, so you can also come into this path effect and change all of your shapes. by double clicking and kind of playing with those shapes like that. So it gives you a lot of flexibility, but you will eventually have to flatten these path effects so that it's just a plain path and it's no longer editable anymore. So I think I'm going to leave it about right there. And then I'm going to also apply this same path effect to this other line. And I'm going to go pattern along path. Make sure you have pattern as vertical set and then hit paste. And then you can also, if you have that line selected, you can come in here and change the width of it here without affecting your original design. So that's two ways that you can kind of edit it. And what I like to do is take both paths now and maybe control and make them a little smaller so I have more room to adjust them. And I like for one side to be a little higher than the other. And this part of the heart can kind of come to a point where this is. So I'm gonna, you can still edit this line as well. So you can select your node tool and then double click there, come back to this point, delete, and now we've gotten rid of that overlap that's there. And I can do the same to this other line. But I think what I'm going to do here is actually go ahead and kind of manipulate this line, because what looks good as a line heart doesn't necessarily look good as a feathered path along a line. So that's weird. So I'm going to Command Z a couple of times. I don't know what happened to that line. I think what's happening here is that I might have 2 points. Yep. Anytime I'm having trouble controlling a line, it's usually because there's 2 nodes stacked on top of each other. So I think that I like the way that is looking. And then as a final step, I'm gonna come in here and I'm going to, yeah, that separates it. That's really cool. I think that looks really good right there. Maybe just a tiny bit. There we go. So once you have that, how you like it, you want to come and flatten your designs. Now, if you flatten this design, which is based on this one, nothing's really going to change because this is still a path effect. So you need to flatten this one first, and you can do that by selecting it, coming over here to this drop down and selecting flatten. And then you want to, at this point, it's still a combined path. I like to double click and kind of come in here to these and select just those nodes and kind of use my arrow key to move them up. It's difficult once you start getting into a combined shape. So sometimes I'll just select this row. Whoops. Select this row. Select all of these nodes. and then I'll press the arrow key to bring them up, just to decrease that gap towards the end of my shapes. So I'm going to do this one. I'm holding down the shift key. Bring that in. You can see how that is giving us a more cohesive shape. But you just have to play with it and get it to a point where you are happy with it. And now that I have it adjusted the way I want it, I'm going to go ahead and select all of this, and I'm going to break this apart. One thing that, if you want a line running through the middle of there, you'll want to duplicate this, and then when you select each one, you'll want to delete this pattern, this live path effect. You can see the other one is still there with the path effect, but now you have a line going through the middle there. So that's kind of nice, and that will kind of help when you're auto routing to help attach all your stitches. But I actually don't like that there. I actually like the auto route to jump at the smallest, closest point, so it's a little less noticeable. So I'm going to go ahead and flatten these two sides. You have to select them individually to flatten them. And you can see now I have nodes around there. And I can now delete this combined shape because I'm done with it. And I still had a duplicated one there. So, okay, so there's my heart shape that I want to use. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to Command K to combine it. Whoops. I think this still has the path effect. Okay, I need to flatten that one. Then I can select these two and Command K to combine them. And I'm going to, again, make it smaller so that I have about 20 millimeters on the top and the bottom. And then I'll show you the more difficult part of creating the meandering fill around it, which will really make these feathers pop and stick out once we stitch them down with batting underneath them. I'll show you now how I create the broken shapes in between that you can use to fill with a meander fill, which will help flatten it and make these pop out more. So you can draw it by hand. You can come in with your Bezier tool, or if you have a graphic tablet, you can kind of draw them in, this middle point. But I prefer to do it differently. I'm going to take my path here, and the very first thing that I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and center it, and then I'm going to duplicate it, Command D. I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to hide it. And then I'm going to select this one that I have that's not hidden, and I'm going to go to Path, and I'm going to select Dynamic Offset. And when you do that, you can see it creates this like bubble around it. That is the offset. And then I will often turn on my original design so I can see how much space is in between there. And I want about that much. And then I'm going to, you just use this little node with your node selection tool to drag the second one out. So I'm going to go ahead and hide my other design, and I'm going to go object or path, object to path, and now those are just nodes, it's not dynamic anymore. And what I want to do is to delete all these inner nodes that aren't really connected to anything. I didn't want to make it so big. And then what you can do with this shape, so now you want to just zoom in and see if you can find any other little points with your node tool that you do not want there. And you can delete them. I'm probably going to delete this area. Well, I'll leave it there for now. We'll see what happens with that. But a lot of these very small points can become difficult once you start cutting out shapes. So I'm going to press 5 to zoom out to my full shape here. And I like to just occasionally look at my feathers and be like, okay, that makes sense. It doesn't make sense like when I'm just looking at it like this, but it does make sense once I turn my feathers back on. Okay, so with both of those on, I'm gonna select my feather layer, and I'm gonna go ahead and lock that so I'm not accidentally selecting it anymore. And I'm just working with this offset. So I'm going to press the minus key and zoom out a little bit more. Then I'm gonna grab my square and I'm gonna, okay, so I just want to draw a square around my feathered heart here, and I want to leave 1 centimeter around the edges, as well as 1 centimeter from the top. So 1 centimeter there, 1 centimeter there, 1 centimeter there. So now that I have that there, I'm going to put a light blue color and no stroke. So I'm going to shift click on none, and I'm going to put that in the back. And this is for now just going to be a guide. So I'm going to come in and grab a circle and fill it with red, and I'm going to draw, and this is where I need my snapping back on. I'm going to draw another 20 by 20 millimeter circle. So now that I have that circle, I'm going to put it up here in the corner so that it's snapping right there. The center of the circle is in the corner of this blue square. And then I'm going to repeat this across. So I'm going to go back to my path effects, drop down menu, tiling, and this time I want just 1 row. And I'm going to keep adding until I have the last circle here, which is in the corner of this other corner of the blue. And then I'm going to go ahead and flatten that to remove the path effect, duplicate it, and drag it down and put it in the same place on the bottom. And then I'm going to duplicate that piece, and I'm going to rotate it by clicking on it twice. And I'm going to snap it to there. And then I need to, with my selector tool, I need to Command Shift K, and I need to delete a couple of my repeats. Now I can select these side shapes, I can Command K, and I can Command D to duplicate them. So I combined them and then I duplicated them. And then I'm gonna put that circle there. And so this is gonna be our poofy circles around. And you can see now that our feathering and our heart, it's a little bit too big because it's running into this here and here. So I'm going to correct that now by, first let's select all of our circle groups, and we're gonna Command K again and combine that to one shape. And we're gonna just shift and drag inward, and that's good. That's enough space around everything for us to do what we need to do now. Select your leaves and lock them again, and you can actually hide them now because we're going to work with these two shapes, and this is actually two shapes right now. So I need to Command Shift K that, and I need to select, this is just going to be a shape on its own. We can hide that. So we need to duplicate those circles so that we don't lose them. So duplicate them. Select one of your duplicates and this square. Go to your Shape Builder tool. Select inside. Select the check mark. And now when we hide our circles, we can see we have that shape. So now we need to take this blue shape and cut this outside of our offset out of it. So we're gonna select our blue shape and our outer offset, and we're gonna select Path Exclusion, and that's gonna cut that out of there. So now we need to turn back on our, looking for my inner shape here. There it is. There's my inner shape, and I'm gonna color that this light blue too. Shift left click to get rid of the fill. What I need to do is cut this heart shape out of this blue shape in the center here. I also need to make a duplicate of that because I'm going to need to have an outline of it later. So I'm going to place this heart in the middle of the inner offset shape, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it and put it where I want it to be. And then I'm going to go ahead and come up here to Path Exclusion, and that's going to cut it out of that blue shape. I then need to come to this heart shape, and I need to, as well as my circles, I can select my circles as well, and I want to shift click on the red and left click on the none X down here. Right click, leave those as 1 millimeter to show that I'm going to have a running stitch going through there. I'm going to bring back my leaves for a second and unlock them, select them. I'm also going to make those red. I keep calling them leaves because they're green, but they're actually feathers. So, and I think I selected a different red for that, so I'm gonna so now I have those, my color palette the way I want to, and my running stitches where I want them to be. And there's two things I need to do. I need to create a meander fill on all of this blue part, these blue parts, and I need to auto route these stitches. Because right now if I select these feathers and I Command Shift P, and then I select my jump stitch, you can see that there's jumping stitches that go all the way around, which doesn't look too bad, but this one here is jumping across my design here, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna go ahead and cancel that. I'm going to select my feathers, and I'm gonna come to Extensions, Inkstitch, Stroke, and I'm gonna go Auto Route Running Stitch. And it's gonna ask if I wanna add nodes and trims. I'm okay with letting it jump and it finding the best place to jump. And I'm gonna hit Apply. And then you can see that it did the auto route stitching and it turned this into a much thinner line. And I'm gonna Command Shift P now. And I'm gonna select my jump stitch, and you can see that it has these little jumps here. And I don't mind that. So I'm gonna press Apply and Quit. And then I'm gonna come and do the same thing for this, these red circles. I'm going to go Extension, Inkstitch, Stroke, Auto Route Running Stitch, Apply. And there it has created my running stitches. So I'm going to save there. This is also a running stitch, but I don't need to do anything to it. Then I'm going to select my meander fills. I'm going to go Command Shift P. And you definitely want to save before you do this. For some reason, this takes a really long time. So it really has to think about how to fill these weird shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my underlay. Well, I'll leave it there so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so just when I thought it was not going to work, there it is filled in. And like I said, it takes a while to figure out how to fill this in. So the first thing you want to do is remove your underlay. And then you want to select meander fill. And then it's going to take a while to figure out. Could not build a graph for meander stitching. Try to enlarge your shape or scale your meander pattern down. So I'm going to try to select meander and scale this down to 80. Let's see if that will work. And an error occurred, so I'm gonna cancel. And I'm just gonna select this outer shape. And I'm gonna Command Shift P. And that worked a little faster. So I'm gonna remove the underlay. And I'm gonna select meander fill. And there we have our meander fill, filling that in. I do change this down to 80 just because it fills it in a little better. It makes all of these meander fill shapes a little bit smaller, so it can get into some of the more finer areas of this outline. So I'm going to go ahead and select trim at the end of this, and I'm gonna let it stitch out. I have found that it does help to let it show you what it's going to do, because sometimes it'll cut a piece off randomly because I guess it just doesn't have the memory for it. So I'm going to hit apply and quit, and then I'm going to select this center piece and I'm going to Command Shift P, and this could be the part that was causing us a problem. Get rid of your underlay, and then change this to Meander fill. And yeah, this is the part that's not letting it stitch out, and I think it has something to do with it being connected to all of this in here. So I'm going to go ahead and unlock all these other layers, and I'm going to select all these little tiny nodes and delete them. And then I'm going to select that whole shape, and you can see that I have these little tiny things going on over here. I don't really think it's that shape, actually. I think it's this part. There's like this shape here. I'll have to delete that. And there's some shapes over here that I need to delete. So let's try that. Remove your underlay. And there we go. It's filling that in, and I'm going to change that to 80. It's a little smaller. And I'm going to go ahead and add a trim and apply and quit. And I'm going to hit save on this whole design. And I'm going to, so let me see if I can find where those are. There's one. There's the other one. Okay. So now everything is spoken for. And I can save it in Command Shift L. And now it is starting to work. So that's how I created my design, and it is a little bit more complicated than most of my other designs. So I recommend just playing with the pattern effects, with the live path effects, and I recommend just continuing to delete some of the smaller points whenever you're creating these weird shapes that are gonna be filled with your meander fill, because the meander fill is very important to make these feathers and your circles pop. Next thing, I'm going to show you what it looks like in the stitch plan preview. Go to Extensions, Inkstitch, Visualize and Export, Stitch Plan Preview. And I'm going to have the stitch plan be beside the canvas. realistic view, high quality, and layer visibility unchanged. I like to add an ignore layer command, and I like to render my jump stitches. And you can override last stitch plan. We don't have one at the moment, but okay, so there it is. And scroll over and see what that looks like. And I have these long jump stitches, but my machine will trim those because that's too far away for a jump stitch. So it'll automatically trim those, but you can add a trim stitch if you're worried that your machine will try to jump that distance. So you want to export your design. So I'm going to go to export, and I'm going to go PES, and I'm going to go ahead and export that. And then I can move that over to my machine and stitch it out. Sometimes I have a USB attached to my computer, and I'll just export straight to the USB. So I can just move it straight over there. So that's pretty much how I created the design. I'll now show you what it looked like when it was stitching out. So you can see here that I've added a layer of cotton, and there are actually 3 pieces of thin cotton batting in between 2 pieces of cotton, and they're kind of sandwiched together, and I hooped them in this magnetic hoop, which is a lot easier to use, but you can make it fit. It is traditionally white. If you remember our Pinterest board here, and you can use a lot of these for your inspiration. Just search on trapunto or feather quilting, and you should find lots of these designs. It was traditionally handmade, but you can still get a really cool effect using machine embroidery. You can see all these poofy parts that still look very fun and playful. And you can even turn it over and it looks like traditional white trapunto. And there are some where it tied off the stitches that you can see from the other side, but you still get a good idea of what it would look like white on white, which still looks really pretty.